So the Thing and the Human Torch have now been added to Season 1.5 patch. I'm just going to quickly go over them before we get started into the patch notes. So as we all saw in the trailer of the Thing's gameplay showcase, so this is just more of an ability overview to give you an idea of what his kit would be like. So for his normal attacks, he's going to be rapidly punching forward, kind of like boxer style as we saw in the trailer. His passive, which I think will really be a game breaker, is that he's now immune to any displacement effects. So any knockbacks or launches up or even trying to be abducted by a Wolverine is now not going to be possible with this tank. His secondary attack is essentially that charged up heavy blow that he does. Now I believe this punch deals damage in an AoE effect and it like pierces through enemies, so you definitely affect more than one target at once. The leap that we saw he does is that he now gets damage reduction for both you and the ally. And his little charge attack is where he charges forward. He's sort of a CC immune in this state, and then he's also not knocking up enemies, anybody caught in his path. And then when he slams down, he's essentially leaving this little like lava zone that cripples enemies so they can't exactly leap or escape out of it unless they walk away from it. And his ultimate, his little clobbering time, is that he does like this sort of earthquake effect that sort of launches enemies in the air in front of him. Then for his team up abilities, it's essentially the same thing as Hulk. You know, he could throw Logan if he wants to. And then this one we didn't really see displayed, but it's essentially the same thing that Mr. Fantastic does, where he regains health over a period of time, depending on how much HP he's missing. And then for the Human Torch, he's essentially going to be a duelist. He's going to be like another one of those flying ones like Storm or Iron Man. His normal attack is that he throws like this cluster of auto attacks, kind of like Psylocke. She sort of has like this shotgun effect. His right click is that he deals a fireball, and then when you've thrown this fireball, it leaves like this flame field effect that you could use your next ability, the Meteor, where you slam to the ground and it detonates those for additional damage. And his next ability, his little his firewall, where you put down two little flame fields, is that, you know, when you connect them and then you ignite them, it essentially creates that little firewall effect to burn anybody caught within the flame fields. His next ability is that he's essentially just going to be getting a movement speed buff. Then his ultimate, this is the one we were all shocked by in the trailer, is where he throws down this little fire tornado, where it's continuously doing damage, and he could put multiple of these at a time, I believe. But granted, one thing to note is that while he's like, it's more of like a change of state than it is just like a deployable ultimate, where his abilities will just be buff. It's like an entire buff throughout his kit. And then the big thing that we all saw was obviously his team up ability with Storm, was that when she passes through any of his abilities, specifically the fire tornado, is that essentially she's just her storm now becomes like a firestorm. And then the usual team up ability that, you know, Sue and Mr. Fantastic have, where they both gain bonus health based on HP lost. Johnny will essentially have that now as well. And that'll really do it for both our new characters added to the game. Welcome back, Rival fans, to the Season 1.5 patch notes. I understand they recently revealed the two other members of the Fantastic Four, the Thing and the Human Torch. I was planning on doing like just a simple breakdown, but I realized that I'd rather just save the Thing, since, you know, I mostly post, you know, tank main stuff, so I'd rather just, like, you know, save a video for him for when I break down his abilities, like, you know, do tips and tricks for him. So so for now we'll just cover the patch notes here. So let's get started. So starting off for Vanguard, so Captain America will receive some enhanced survivability, and his vibranium energy saw will feel a lot smoother, and his ultimate will be more attainable thanks to reduced energy costs. So essentially he's going to be able to shield himself when you're mid leap, because you weren't able to do that before. You would just have your shield out, you would leap, and then just kind of expose yourself. Then his energy saw, um, when you throw it, it's essentially just going to be traveling faster, and when it ricochets off enemies, that speed is also increased. So it doesn't just look like it's just hitting one person and then just traveling to the next one at a very slow rate. It's actually gonna, keep its momentum. His ultimate got a cooldown from 31 to 2800. This is a nice little change. It definitely enhances his survivability. And then this one's a little bit tricky to explain, but essentially is that you passively would change from melee attacks to your shield throws, but now when you want to, you can essentially just you now have melee attacks and then your normal attacks. So everybody knows that when you would just left click, you would do your normal attacks, especially if you were like a ranged character. But if you were to press like the V, the melee button, you would, obviously do a melee attack. Now you could sort of do this for Captain America now. So if you don't like that whole, punch once or twice and then just start throwing your shield, you could just now exclusively just use, your melee button to continuously do melee attacks, which is kind of useful if you're going against like a Doctor Strange or Magneto. And I guess this kind of works when you're doing your team up ability as well, your charged Aegis, where you're continuously throwing your shield around when teamed up with Thor. And then lastly is that while he's airborne, you would just look down at the ground to slam. That's not affected as well because, obviously holding the left click would just trigger that ability. But if you were just to look down and then use your melee button, it won't trigger this ability. So it's a nice little quality of life changes that he's received. Next up is Doctor Strange. He's just getting a simple little HP nerf. Which is kind of fine. It's like not the biggest thing in the world. His big thing is that, he has 600 HP. Well, at least now he does. And then plus on top of his 800 HP shield. So, he still technically is one of the beefiest tanks in the game. Up next is Groot. He's essentially just getting more range out of his wall, the small wall, the Thornlash one that attacks enemies when you attack them. You're just now going to be able to place it farther back. From 15 meters to 18. Nice little change, nothing too drastic, maybe like around tight corners or like small alleyways, like, you'll be able to trap enemies a little bit better and easier. Magneto, he's getting kind of a shift, so his normal attacks, the projectile damage will now deal 40 direct hit damage, not the explosion, just like, the impact. And then his shield, when you lift it up, it's now going to be, you're going to absorb more damage, which could charge your ult faster, or your little iron rings on the behind your back. It's like those are going to be charged up faster now. But the little shift is that you're now going to be able to hold your shield up for a maximum of 1.5 seconds instead of 2. So it is going to require a bit better timing as to when you should use it and when you should block things. So just a little buff and nerf, slight shifts here and there. Up next for Thor, they remove the shared cooldown after the duration of Awakening Rune ends. So normally as Thor, when you would use an ability, it would essentially put all your other abilities on cooldown. So you would have to like, throw your hammer, wait about like 1.5 seconds, and then, use your dash, wait. But for this one, it's that when you do the Awakening Rune where you're continuously throwing lightning bolts, when that ends, it's that you're going to be able to just immediately resume action and use either of your other abilities, like throw the hammer or dash forward. Because it did kind of feel weird, like after you would end this ability, you're kind of just left there, not being able to do anything except for melee attack. Because, you're using this ability for ranged attacks. Like, it's attacking enemies from afar, and so if you're using it and then you're just kind of the ability ends and then you go into cooldown, you're kind of just left to do nothing. So you know, maybe a good little combo would be, you know, use this and then when it ends, throw your hammer, you know, an additional 70 damage on top of all that. Then up next is Venom. So they adjusted the knockback effect for when you do your little dive from vertical to inwards. So, you know, when you were to land on top of enemies, they would just, like, you know, jump right up. They would be launched up into the air, but instead they're going to be launched towards the center of where you landed. So this is kind of more of like a wrecking ball effect. You know, when wrecking ball would slam down, you know, you're bringing enemies closer together towards the center. And so this would, you know, make it easier for ultimate, which I'll get into next. So, you know, you would bring more enemies together, closer together, and then ult on top of them. It's pretty much the same effects. Like this is you know, little wrecking ball effect is that's why I use it, why I'm using that example. Then on top of that, his ultimate is getting reduced energy cost, so you'll be able to use it more often now. And for our duelist, or DPS, Black Widow getting another buff. No surprise there, but essentially they're increasing the ammo count for her sniper. And then her ultimate is that they're nerfing the slow, but essentially any enemies that are caught within the plasma radius, they're gonna be taking 15% more damage. So this could essentially, like this is definitely gonna put her on this, like on the, what do you call it? It's definitely gonna put her on the spot. Essentially, is to like, hey, let's be careful here, because before it would just be like, you know, oh, she shot her ultimate, like let's move on, like, you know, let's just leap out of it or whatever, or let me dash out of it. It's like essentially did nothing. Or some people just wouldn't even mind being slowed, you know, because especially when they're on points where they have to capture it. So it's like, it's not that it would affect them really, but now the enemies that are caught within it are going to be taking 15% more damage. So essentially she could one-shot really if let's say you were to shoot it and then some DPSs were to just jump on top of it, like those that weren't shot or like hurt by the explosion first off, like maybe they just step onto it and then now you could like essentially one-shot. So this could bring that whole little one-shot mechanic that people want for her, but I don't know, this is definitely something to look out for now. Up next is Hawkeye. So they're increasing his health. They're reducing the projectile damage of his blast arrows, even though nobody really uses it, but the explosion radius will be increased from 25 to 32, so it's going to do more blast damage, but you're not really using this. I think they should just get rid of it or just like entirely rework it, but it's a nice little change nonetheless. And then reducing the cooldown of his little knockback slash that he does. And then also is that when you use your ultimate, you're going to be able to draw a lot faster, and you're also going to be doing more damage to the little like, you know, clones that you see that when you're looking at an enemy. Up next is Hela. So the damage fall off Knight Sword Thorn at 30 meters will be changed from 70 to 30, or excuse me, 80. So essentially, I think this is like a revert. So I think before she would, enemies that are farther out, they would only take 70% of the damage. Now they're just bringing it back to 80%. Like any other like normal ranged attack that has damage fall off. So a slight little change, but you know, she's still gonna be like unaffected. You know, this just boosts her up if anything. Next up is Iron Fist. Now, it does seem like a lot of just like a big block of text, but essentially what they're doing is that as fast, like when you're doing, like his normal attacks have like a 5 or a 6 attack chain. So you're just like punching 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, and then 6, which is the 6th one does the knockback effect. But essentially what they're doing is they're nerfing the faster attacks, and they're buffing I'm sorry, I'm just rereading this. So they're actually just nerfing just all the attacks just straight up, like by a minor percentage. But what they're doing is that when you go into your little fast attack mode, is that you now will be dealing 1.7% of an opponent's maximum health. So this could essentially put them on par with, you know, Wolverine. Because before, when you would punch somebody, you would just repeatedly punch them for 10 damage, as it says right here. But now it's doing a percentage damage, so this could bring him on par with Wolverine now. Then when you would go into your chi, your little meditation mode, is that it's now going to go from 50 to 150, and then it's also going to be depleting. It's a lot slower, but overall he's just getting a health boost from the ability and, like, you know, his normal self. Next up is Iron Man. So we'll go over this later, but what it's essentially doing is that they're essentially buffing his unity beam damage to rely less on the team up, so, you know, he's able to just do the damage he does without the team up, so he could still feel, like, you know, threatening. And then magic, they're nerfing the damage that the demon does. Like when you go into like your little portal and then you spawn the demon, it's doing less damage per second, and then her ultimate is getting a little bit of a cooldown, so you'll be able to use it much more often. Then for Mr. Fantastic, they're essentially buffing like the ability that you use when you essentially grab onto a target and then, like, you know, you boost yourself to them. If you do it to enemies, like it's now gonna have a knockback effect. Plus, it's gonna like the damage radius that it does, because it does do like it doesn't just do damage to the enemy that you bounce to, but it would do like this 2.5 meter damage radius is now buffed to 5 meters. So any enemies that are caught together will essentially be knocked back together. But granted this effect, the cooldown will now be 8 to 10 seconds. Then they're buffing his ultimate, where it does it starts off at 50 damage to 70. It is gonna have a longer cooldown. And then on top of that is that if you were to damage enemies at the center, they'll be taking you know, the full damage, versus enemies that are caught like, you know, at the outer range of the radius is they'll be taking less damage. Then Moon Knight, his ultimate essentially is that, like, you know, the little fists that are dropping is that they're going to be falling down a bit slower, not too slow, but it's going to give time for better reaction. You know, sometimes it would sometimes be like 2 fists fall at the same time, so you're just taking this incredible burst of damage. So granted that it's falling slower, that each fist will now deal 150 instead of the 75, so it does seem like an overall buff, even though it's going to be falling slower, but at least they kind of just fixed the situation where you would sometimes be randomly dealt damage by 2 fists instead of 1. And then Scarlet Witch, when she uses her ultimate, she's essentially getting the Spider-Man and Storm treatment, where they both get bonus health when they use their ultimates, so this could give her some survivability. It is nice. I do think it should have been more though, but granted what this ability can do, it is kind of scary if it's left unchecked, but I would still say it's somewhat easy to stop it, whether it be CCing her or just completely eliminating her. But other than that, when the ability ends or is interrupted, you'll still get the bonus health effect, but it will also just be decaying like after 2 seconds. Spider-Man, he's just getting a small little buff to his web clusters. You know, when he shoots the little web balls or whatever, you know, you have 5 of those charges. So it's just, you know, you're going to be able to use them more often. Just a little 0.5 buff. Star-Lord increases rocket propulsion maximum energy from 12 to 1800. So this essentially means that you're going to have more fuel to burn, so you're going to be flying a lot longer. A good little change for Star-Lord mains. And then for Storm is that they nerfed her damage, her little auto attacks, that you know, at 30 meters, any enemies caught within or caught farther out from 30 meters, they'll only be taking 60% of that damage. And then her little buff, her little aura buff that she does, is that she's going to benefit less from it, but, you know, allies that are within the range, they'll still remain the same, or at least it's 10% now instead of 8%, so less boost for her and more boost for your allies. And then they're also nerfing the thunder side of her. Not exactly the movement speed, the wind one, but they're nerfing that damage boost from 30% to 75%. Now on to our strategists, our healers, our supports. So Adam Warlock, they're essentially buffing his normal attacks from 55 to 60. And then the damage fall off, enemies that are farther out, they'll be taking 60% instead of 50, so good little buff there. And then they're also increasing his healing, his little soul bond, like when you link all your allies together. It will just be healing 15 per second instead of 10. Cloak and Dagger, this one's a big one, I think, is that, so her ultimate is going to be on a longer cooldown, and that now her dashes is essentially this whole block of text. What it's explaining is that her dashes no longer stack. So, if you were to try to layer them together, you dash once and then dash back again, that's not going to double the healing effect. It's now just going to be one. So dash forward and back, it doesn't matter how many times you do it, it's not going to stack. But you are dashing faster, so you dash forward and then dash again. The little pause between each segment is now boosted, so this could be a little bit more difficult for Magneto mains that try to kill you. And also the whole effect is that the little area that you're healing, it's been boosted to kind of compensate that little loss, but also it's only going to stay there for 8 seconds instead of 10. And then a little quality of life change is that you're now able to sort of look around when you're dashing, so you'd essentially be looking towards where you're dashing toward. Like the camera would be locked to where you're dashing towards. Like you could still just dash and then sort of look around to see your surroundings. So it's a nice little change there, essentially. And then also when you would throw or blind enemies with your little terror cape, that's been buffed, so enemies are now taking 28% more damage instead of the 20%. Then next is Invisible Woman, just nerf to her ultimate. It's gonna be on a longer cooldown. Same thing with Loki, longer cooldown ultimate, but he's now gonna have more ammo, so his healing output will be increased by a little. Luna Snow as well. A longer cooldown. I think this is the biggest one actually, because everyone else's is like 4,000 to 4,300, and Luna Snow's is 4,500. So her ult is gonna hurt the worst. Now in regards to team ups, so the Luna Snow and Iron Fist. So when you would team up, Luna Snow would get this like this sort of knockback effect where she would heal any allies when she does that circle effect, the knockback. And then also that healing has been increased, and then also the knockback and the slow has been increased. Dimensional Shortcut, the Psylocke Black Panther team up with Magic. The cooldown's been reduced, and additionally is that when you would any health that you would lose before you teleported has been increased as bonus shields. So this goes for both Psylocke and Black Panther. So more healing and then faster cooldowns to use the teleport. And Gamma Charge, this is what I was talking about earlier with Iron Man, when I kind of just glossed over his, is that, so when you would do the team up, the laser attack is essentially been nerfed from 220 to 200. And then for Hulk, given he's the anchor being in this team up, this is essentially just a nerf to Hulk that, instead of 150 health, he's now going to just have 100 additional health on top of him. So I think he had like 800, so now he's only going to have like 750, I believe. Granted, I think this also affects him in his ultimate form, World Breaker form. So instead of the 15, like the 1,550, he's now just going to have 1,500. It's a small little change, but it's understandable. Then the team up with Moon Knight and Cloak and Dagger is that he would get like this little dome that he would place upon himself to kind of just hide where he is. It's like it wasn't necessarily the best. It's like we know you're in there, you're not exactly hiding, but it has another use now where when you cast it, Moon Knight now heals 25 health per second while in that area. So nice little change there. And then Symbiote Bond, the Venom plus Penny Parker and Spider-Man, is that when they use the damage thingies, it's not gonna last longer. So it's from 4 seconds to 1 second. So it gets quick, faster damage. But the little change I'm seeing here, which is kind of scary in my opinion, is that they would take reduced damage while they're doing that, but now they're totally just invincible. They're immune, I believe, to just any CC or damage during this. So Spider-Man, when he uses it, he's just going to be immune for 1 second, and Penny Parker, she's going to be immune for 2 seconds. So this I would not overlook. Like, this could be definitely scary now. Penny Parker and a Venom, just on defender side or attacking, it's like doesn't matter which. It's she's just gonna be able to immune any ability, any high damaging ability that's like Iron Man or Scarlet Witch. Like, this could be really scary.